Alison, good to see you. I know you've been super busy because of what's happening at the moment, so thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. I appreciate that. Let me kick off with something that you said to me last time we were talking. You said the way weddings are organised is going to change completely over the next few years. I mean, weddings are a big deal for people and they cost a lot of money. I mean, when you say it's all going to change, what do you mean and what kind of impact's that going to have?
We're seeing a huge impact already from the Gen Z generation coming in. They have very, very different priorities. They look at the world in a very, very different way. They are spending in a different way and they're researching in a different way. So, wedding businesses, and it's wedding businesses that we deal with, are having to completely rethink the way they work in order to work with this generation coming through. So, what we're going to see is massive changes, I think, from the point of view of everything from where people are getting married. There's possible law changes coming up, which is going to
Yeah,
feed into
yeah.
that as well. But also what people are wanting from the point of view of traditions. We're seeing a lot of the traditions merging, blending, multicultural influences coming in where you just wouldn't expect them, and really just every wedding becoming so much more unique. And I think it's a really exciting time for the industry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Tell me, let's just pick up a couple of things that you mentioned there. I mean, when you say people are searching in different ways, I mean, just tell me what you mean by that. I mean, presumably, tell me if I've got this wrong. Presumably, what's happening is that AI is influencing how people search for stuff. Is that what you're saying? And if that's the case, what kind of impact is that having?
Yeah, AI is a massive influence already, and it's having a big impact. So, the latest research from the point of view of weddings is actually about a year old, but it was indicating that 67% of couples at that point were using AI to research their
Wow,
wedding. Now, that's a year ago when all of us were still going, hang on a minute,
that's
what's this?
extraordinary.
But yeah, but if you think the Gen Z generation, there are, those are the under 30s, those are going to be the really fast adopters. So it makes complete sense, particularly because it's something that they know very little about. So our
Mm.
generation, we would have been really influenced by what our parents had done and what they thought that we should be doing. They were probably paying for the wedding, and they would have a really strong influence on what went on. The generation now planning weddings are starting from scratch. They have very little information other than having been a guest at a wedding. So they'll have a few ideas about the aesthetics, the feel, the guest experience. And
Mm.
this is then what they're feeding into their wedding planning. But they have no idea where to start on how much would a wedding venue cost? How much do I allow per head for catering? How much wine does a wedding guest
Yeah,
drink? Am
yeah.
I meant to supply the drinks needed? But AI is answering all of those questions for them. It's great. It's feeding off websites like ours and giving them the information that they need in order to guide those decisions. So, yeah, massive. And when you think, I mean, even just 5 years ago, everyone would have said, perhaps even just 3 years ago, if you asked people, they would say, how do people research weddings? They go onto Instagram, they go onto Pinterest, they perhaps go onto Facebook, and they get inspiration of what looks nice. They then go onto directories to find out where they can get that, and they book it through email. That's not happening anymore. They're wanting to use WhatsApp over email. It's
Yeah,
much quicker, it's
yeah,
much easier. We're
yeah.
really slow in the UK. Every other country is using WhatsApp. So all of these changes are coming in. But yeah, AI, as you say,
And
it's massive.
and let me ask you about the kind of the, I mean, I would never have thought about going and getting married somewhere else, a different part of the world. You know, that's quite a big thing, I think, now, isn't it? People getting married in other parts of the world. I mean, what's driving that, do you think? And I know this has created some challenges for you. I mean, just give us a sense of why that's so important to people and what impact is that having on people like you?
So obviously we're dealing with the perhaps the more challenging side of destination weddings at the moment, because one of the really popular destinations at this time of year is the Gulf Coast countries. So um, Abu Dhabi, Dubai,
Yeah, yeah.
Bahrain, all of these places that at the moment are being impacted by the challenges there. But they are really, really important destinations, particularly in some cultures where multi-day events involving 150 plus
Yeah.
guests, we're just not that well geared up to be serving those weddings in the UK. So 40% of couples are considering a destination wedding. Uh, an average across the UK, it's reckoned about 20% of couples are actually going through with it. So there's a big gap there.
Yeah.
And a lot of overseas destinations are trying to fill that gap. They're letting our couples know all sorts of things about, the opportunities there. But 26% of particularly South Asian weddings, the big
Yeah.
multi-day cultural celebrations are going overseas at the moment. So yeah, quite a big opportunity. And if we wind back to in the period immediately after 9/11, it was virtually zero.
Yeah.
Prior to 9/11, we thought around 30%, but that was before weddings were allowed outdoors in the UK. That's been the big shift here. Will we go back up to that number? Unlikely, but I don't think we'll be far off.
No, I mean, it's very interesting times, isn't it? Let me come back to you and your business, because I know you're very forward thinking in this area. I mean, what is it that you're trying to achieve? I mean, given there's all these changes happening to your market, I mean, what is it that, what's the prize that you're after?
The prize that we're after is, I think, as it always has been. So we've been in business for a little bit over 30 years, and it's always been to be considered that independent and trusted source of the right information. So, and that's been, my focus today has been trying to get the right information out to couples who've got weddings planned in the Middle East over the next few weeks.
Mm.
That needs to be a priority, but it can't ever be rushed. That needs to be based on the facts that we're getting from contacts in those countries.
Yeah.
And then right down to, information on budgets, making sure it's information that's coming from data that we can see, we can verify ourselves, but also explaining what the relevance of that data is. So letting couples see the context behind it. So that all of the data that is published on weddings, for example, is coming from the online directories. So this is the data of the sort of couples that would plan weddings using online directories. It doesn't mean it represents an average wedding. There's a lot of people planning their weddings in different ways.
Yeah. Oh, and what is it that sort of set you on that path, as it were? I mean, what's the background to all this for you?
So, from my point of view, I approached the business at the beginning as somebody that was getting married, and I also had a wedding company. So, I had a wedding cake company at the time.
Oh,
I was trying to find the way to sort of bridge the gap between couples and the businesses that they wanted to engage with. So, from my point of view, as a wedding business, I wanted to get accurate information out there. As a bride planning a wedding, I wanted accurate information. So,
yeah.
that's always been very much a cornerstone of the business. And over the years, we've seen over the last few decades that marketing and social media marketing came in, and anything could be faked, anything could be created online. You were seeing a lot of, going back to wedding cakes, sort of polystyrene cakes being presented as being real cakes. We've now got AI created cakes, and you looked at them and you thought you can't physically actually build what has been created there out of cake. But couples were wanting it, so getting that sort of, getting that correct information out there was always important. Now, even more so, because the challenge with AI is working out what's real, what's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And that again is where we are adapting the business now, making sure that we are focusing on very, very different evidence points. It can't just be a photograph anymore. It used to be that
Yeah.
we would always say to businesses, put a photograph online because then people can see it's real. They can't. That can be
Yeah.
manipulated now. Videos can be manipulated. So it's now how do we develop that trust, both on our platform and also for all of our clients.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting your point about trust, because I mean, business is based on trust, isn't it, really? If you lose that, you kind of lose everything, really. It's a really interesting point there. Let me ask you about the being the CEO. I mean, It's a very interesting time to be building a business at the moment, I think. And now I know you've got a bit of a history with it, so you've kind of evolved, along the way. How do you, as the CEO, kind of keep the business on the front foot, given all the stuff that's happening? I mean, there's the geopolitical stuff, there's the changes with technology, there's the changes to legislation about who can and can't get married and how that can happen and all the rest of it. How do you keep the business on the front foot? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a massive question. And I would say, from my point of view, it is a matter of understanding the data, knowing what data to look at, being brutally honest with the data.
Mm,
And again, this is where AI can help because by using several different AI models, you can really challenge your own data and remove any of your personal preconceptions from it. I rely on my common sense to just stress test any idea that we are considering. And with everything, we start small. We test it small. And
mm.
when it works, if it works, we move on with it. If it doesn't work, we learn from it and we adapt what we're doing. So, and I would think those steps, just step and repeat with that, but understanding your business, talking to your clients. I think this is something that a lot of CEOs really, really undervalue the importance of really understanding the problems. And our business moved on in quantum leaps during the early months of COVID because when I sent everyone home from the office to work from home. And I got on the phone, I got on Zoom, and I spent all day, every day talking to businesses. And obviously, we were talking a lot about what was going on at the time, but also we were talking about their general business concerns, how they were structuring things. And I learned so much about how the wedding businesses operated and actually how incredibly fragile our industry was. I don't think businesses realized that they were leaving couples as vulnerable as they were. And it really exposed a lot of that. So I think from my point of view, learning from that, learning how we can support those businesses, but also making sure that we have built the most professional business we possibly can so that we're leading by example, we're not vulnerable ourselves. And having that from the bottom up, our culture is very much do it right, do it small, do it right, and always be driven by the values and principles that we work around.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned data. There's a lot of talk about data at the moment. I mean, what sort of data? I have this whole set of stuff going on in my head when people talk to me about data. I mean, when you talk about using the data to guide what you do? I mean, just give us a sense of the sorts of data that you have and what that means, and how does that shape you the way you move the business forward? I get your point about talking to customers. Totally get that. Tell me how the data bit plays here.
So we study the data from weddings taking place, particularly across the UK. So what's being spent, where it's being spent, where people are getting married, what their
Mm,
priorities are, size of weddings. And that is then very, very useful for advising. For example, I do a little bit of consultancy with wedding venue owners and investors
right.
considering opening a new venue or considering launching a new venture in a new area. So, in those situations, actually understanding what the competitor landscape is there, being able to predict the success factors of a venue. We've got a really, really clear matrix that we can literally go through and score a venue on a series
Wow.
of questions, and that will tell you whether there's going to be under 60 weddings in that venue, between 60 and 120, which tends to be a danger period financially, or whether it's got the potential for huge growth and these
Mm,
weddings throughout the week. And we can predict that with extraordinary accuracy. And yes, the venue team does feed into it, and their marketing strategy and so on will feed into it. But you've got to start, I think, with any business, you've got to start with a good product. And
mm,
we're able to use our data points to say this is a good product. And this year, using AI, we've actually fed the data in from all of the industry reports
right.
into one data report that we can then pull on. And it takes about 27 seconds now to do a report on an individual business. We can literally just type in a question, this is on the coast in Brighton that doesn't have any parking. What's the limitations going to be here? What weddings should they be attracting? How do they pitch their pricing? Bang, it'll do it.
Wow.
Seconds.
And presumably you're using that to advise people that want to have a wedding. So you're enabling them to have the best possible wedding. I mean, have I understood that correctly?
Yes, so what we're trying to do is match couples up with the right businesses
Yeah.
to serve their wedding. So, and this is where it is lovely. There's so many different businesses
Yeah.
that will serve every different need. So helping couples choose something that, if they're on a lower budget, helping them work out what the compromises are that are going to be fine for them, for example.
Mm.
So, advising couples, to go for midweek, for example. These are the savings that you can expect midweek, but don't expect those savings on your photographer, for example, and this is why.
Mm.
You can expect it on the venue if it is a venue that is geared up specifically and solely for weddings, but not one that does conferences. You'll be paying more on a Thursday if they also do conferences. So this data is information that's there, it's readily available, and it's just we act as a conduit between the businesses and the couples, just to make it easier for the couples to make those decisions. Because if you were a couple and you had spoken to somebody else who had said midweek weddings are less expensive, you then went to a venue that happens to have good conference trade, got a price from them, you might then be quite shocked
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're then competing with the conference trade. Actually, same venue on a Monday or on a Friday or at the weekend, much, much lower prices. Some of the City of London venues, a few of those offer half price rates during August. August is the peak wedding month in the
Yeah.
UK. So for us, our role as a marketing partner for that venue is to get that message out. And we do that through talking about it on social media, talking about it in blog posts, talking about it in a way that AI is hopefully going to pick it up when couples say, I'm getting married in London in August, is this a good idea? Yes, you can get half price rates at this venue. And as long as you've got less than 80 guests or whatever it is, it should be moving in that direction in the future.
I mean, it kind of looks to me like it's a really good win-win because it's good for the venues, it's good for the other suppliers, the photographers and the cake makers and all the rest of it, and it's good for the couples. I mean, it seems to me that's a tremendous win-win.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like anything, knowledge is power. Giving the couples this knowledge is really powerful. Giving the venues the knowledge is really powerful. Giving the suppliers the knowledge is really powerful. So, and we sit in the middle of that, just helping it happen.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that sounds like a really interesting thing to be doing as well as a good thing to be doing. Let me ask you about being an entrepreneur. I mean, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and they pretty much all say that it's a bit like riding a roller coaster. I mean, you have good
Yes.
days, there are bad days, and there are lots of things in between. I mean, what is it that motivates you to ride that roller coaster, if you get my drift? Because it's a tough gig building a business.
Yeah, and I think a roller coaster is a really good way to look at it. It's exciting. It's challenging. It is unpredictable. And I think it is those things that if you have an entrepreneur mindset, sits very, very comfortably with you. And you have to be comfortable. You have to be excited by this. We've just been interviewing this week we're opening up a couple of new roles within the marketing team. And because marketing is going to change so much over the next couple of years, we're not we're not going to be recruiting based on the skill set. We're recruiting entirely down to, are they a match to our culture? And are they excited by what's happening? So the questions that we're asking are really picking up who's going to be stressed by change? Who is looking at AI and going, I have no idea what the impact is going to be on this business. Bring it on. This is exciting because that's the mindset we need. We need to have people in our businesses over the next few years who are going to be excited by every change and not resistant.
Yeah.
There is not going to be the time for CEOs to try and drag the reluctant followers along. It has got to be people that go, wow, this is great. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit scared. That's natural. You would be reckless if you weren't. But I am energized by the challenge. And I think surrounding yourself with other entrepreneurs who look at business like that is is the best thing you can do. I'm in various entrepreneur groups, and the support you get from others within that. Some of them aren't affected at all by AI, which I find extraordinary. And we found the same during the pandemic, that there were some businesses that was like, yes, business as normal, whereas there were others like us that were massively impacted. So yes, it's a really interesting time, but we have the benefit that that lovely benefit of hindsight, having gone through the terrifying time of the internet coming along in 1997, 1998, in our very early years.
Mm.
And it was that that allowed our first massive period of growth. So that's what we're looking at again now. We are very, very well positioned to benefit.
Yeah. And let me pick up the point you've made about bringing people in. I mean, one of the interesting challenges I think is how you build a culture in the business that equips your people to perform at a, the high level. Because I mean, you haven't got loads and loads of spare flesh. It's not like you've got, 100,000 people and you've got 20 or 30 people that you can just deploy where you want to. It doesn't work that way in businesses like yours, does it? I mean, how do you, as the CEO, build that high performance culture? I mean, I get your point about recruiting the right people. Once you've got them, I mean, how do you get them on the right seats on the bus, if you see what I mean? And how do you keep them all pointing in the right direction?
Having that flexibility on which seat they want to sit in is important.
Yeah.
Generally, they come in knowing what it is they're wanting to do, but in all of the roles within the office, there is some flexibility. We don't have the set job description and you will be doing this. So when people come in, the two new hires we've just taken on, we were sitting down after, they're both very, very similar skill sets. So we were sitting down after interviewing them and going, right, who do you feel would be a fit for this? Who would be a fit for
Yeah.
that? Actually, let's start both of them. Let's let both of them have complete overview of what it is the business does. And then they'll find their own lane. And for them to know what they love and do what they love is going to be how we get the
So,
performance out of them.
so
So
what
they
you're saying
become
is it's about playing people to their strengths. Is that right?
absolutely. And we very, very strongly believe that everyone should be doing something that they really enjoy 80% of their time. If
Mm.
they're spending more than 20% of their time on things that make them go, oh, I really ought to get on and do X, Y, Z, then I want to know about it. And as a CEO, I want to know about it. This isn't a matter of just going to your line manager, because it may be that there's something that your line manager is doing that you would like to take on. Let's allow that growth. So,
Mm.
absolutely, it's one of the things comes straight to me. And but we're a small team. It's 10 of us. We're collaborative. Everyone knows what each other's jobs are, which I think again really, really helps on that. People can see where they can add value. And if they can add value to somebody else's project, great. Bring it on. We don't have any kind of, no, that's not your job. Stay out of that. Everyone pitches in where it's needed.
Yeah. And are there other examples? I mean, what you've just described there is how your view about flexibility has influenced the way you've built the business. I mean, I totally get that. I mean, in small businesses, it's very difficult to see how it would work any other way, actually. But are there other areas where your values have influenced the way that you've built the business?
Everything we do, I think when you are a small business, it always comes back to your values. So we have always operated in a very, very honest and ethical way.
Right.
So when we're making decisions, for example, if there is a right decision that will mean the business loses money, we'll still take that right decision. And in the long term, it's really, really paying off, because what we're now seeing, again, through AI is unwrapping all of those layers. And anyone that hasn't been genuinely operating correctly and ethically, it's really unraveling now. It's becoming much, much more obvious. So So yeah, I think having those values, having that really, really strong moral compass. There have been times when I'm sure the team have cursed it, particularly the sales team who are, commission based. When we've said, I mean, for example, really good example, we were the first online wedding platform to bring in reviews. So online reviews, they're so normal now, but we've been to a conference in the States where at the time there was Yelp, which is a
Yeah.
little bit like Trustpilot and so on here, and went to a webinar that was talking about Yelp and the challenge of getting reviews taken down if you got a negative review on Yelp. So when we came back, we looked into it. We thought this is a really good idea to allow clients to give feedback on the businesses because actually that's how you book. It's moving personal recommendations online. Let's make it easier for couples. And it allows the businesses to correctly reflect how they operate, good or bad, because it's not usually that it's bad, it's that it hasn't worked for that couple. But
Yeah.
because it hasn't worked for that couple, it'll work for somebody else. So our policy right from the start was that we don't ever edit reviews and we don't remove reviews. And businesses have the right to reply. But it's a really important principle that we don't remove them just because somebody is paying us a lot of money to market their business and they don't want anything negative. And it's completely human nature and understandable from their point of view that they would want that review to be there. During COVID, we were under massive pressure and we lost some very, very big clients because they withdrew their advertising if we wouldn't remove the negative reviews about how they were handling bookings during COVID. But in our mind, how you behave as a business at a time of crisis is a
Yeah.
reflection of how you are going to behave at any time. You're just covering up the cracks the rest of the time. So we left the reviews there. We allowed a right to reply, and we, where appropriate, added editorial explaining why somebody would have a particular point of view, but that it might not be fair on the venue. So reputationally for the venues, the ones that stuck with us, it was very, very few that were getting negative reviews, very, very few, but they removed their listings from us.
Yeah.
What we are now seeing with AI is actually it's the businesses that have a few mixed reviews that AI trust more.
Yeah.
So by following that policy all the way through, not only is our platform utterly trusted for being completely honest at all time and giving couples the right to be honest and venues the right to be honest and suppliers the right to be honest, but also AI is picking up on it and going, actually, this is authentic, this is
Yeah.
real. So
Yeah.
it goes back to those values.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've talked to quite a few CEOs who've basically said that doing the tough thing has paid off in the long term. I mean, difficult short term, but paid off in the long term. And that's another example that you've just
Yeah, awful in the
described
short
there.
term, so hard. And
Yeah.
particularly, as I said, the sales team here, the account managers, who were just wanting to, particularly when some venues, it was naive mistakes. But actually, it's more important to put your hands up and go, that was a naive mistake. This is how it happened, and this is how we're making sure it's not going to happen again. That right to reply. And most couples are really happy with that. You don't need to bury it. You don't need to hide these things. It's much better just to take responsibility and be a little bit accountable. And couples get
Yeah.
the reassurance from that.
Yeah, I might want to mention that to a few political parties. But anyway, let me ask you, one of the things that's interesting about your business is you've been around for a few years, and what you've been through are a series of changes. The internet coming along, etc., etc., and now we're going through another change with AI. I mean, what's your take on how you build resilience into the business? Because I think a lot of startups think I've got this great idea and I'll build the business. And then, of course, markets change, customer expectations change, technology changes, stuff changes, doesn't it? And to keep going, you have to adapt, which means you need to have an element of resilience as kind of in within the business. I mean, where does that come from in your business? Because you've obviously reinvented yourself a few times. I mean, where does it come from for you?
I think having that determination to find solutions, having a team that are problem solvers.
Mm.
Nobody comes to me and says, "I've got this problem, fix it." It's, "I've got this problem. I think this might be the solution. Could we look at this?" So the whole team is behind it. But being a small enough business to be able to flex with change and take those small steps, what we were talking about earlier on
Mm.
around trying something small, see if it works. And if it works, you then roll that out to a larger degree. So the most recent project has been probably the biggest thing we've taken on. So launching the UK Wedding Association,
Right.
absolutely massive project that for the last year we've launched it as a not-for-profit, and this is partly to test or to demonstrate the theory around trust being critical in the future.
Mm.
And that to me is a really logical step. Was I going to change Guides for Brides into the UK Wedding Association, which would have been a really obvious step, is we could have just said, actually, one of the things Guides for Brides will do in the future is
Right.
do accreditation for businesses, and this will be a commercial model. That would have been a very inexpensive shift within our business, but would put our business model at a lot of risk. Instead of that, what we've done is said, actually, let's see where the UK Wedding
Mm.
Association will go. Will it coexist with Guides for Brides? Will we end up in the long term running both of them? I hope not. I'm going to be exhausted. um, hope one or the other somebody will take on at some point. But that has, in that situation, it wasn't a matter of making a small change for the business. It was, this would need a complete pivot in the way
Mm.
people approach wedding planning, but that pivot may be happening. And if it is happening, we need to be there and be at the forefront. So we need to have developed the platform that people will rely on in the future.
It's that thing we were talking about earlier about being on the front foot, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not even the front foot, it's leaning forward into the front foot. It's actively looking, um, assuming that things are going to change with every generation, and every new technology will make a difference
Yeah.
to people that are planning. And it comes back to the fact that people plan weddings. I was going to say they only do it once. 40% do it more than once, unfortunately. But people are, when they're coming into wedding planning, they don't know where they're starting. Therefore, you've got to be ahead of the new technologies, because that's going to be what they're using each time. They're not leaning on
And
the
let me
older.
ask you about this trend towards kind of global weddings. I mean, one of the things that strikes me about that is that if you're ever going to need help, it's to plan a wedding in another country. I mean, that seems to me to be a fairly obvious place to say, okay, I'm going to need some help with this. Even if it's only somewhere fairly nearby, like France, it's still a different way of working to the way it is in the UK. I mean, getting married in, I don't know, Paris, it's going to be very different from getting married in Dubai, for example. I mean, how do you as a business sort of deal with the kind of cultural nuances? And now I know there's a set of sort of processes that need to be worked through, and there's technology that enables you to do it, and all the rest of it. But there are different, cultures are different. People's expectations are different in those settings. How do you manage those challenges?
So we've got a completely different business working a completely different structure, funnily enough,
Right.
to handle those. So Beyond Weddings is just destination weddings and luxury UK weddings. So it's a particular market we're serving rather than a particular destination. So it is aimed towards high net worth couples wanting to plan a major celebration either here or overseas. So we're looking at the countries that they are most likely to be going to, and emerging countries, and making those more accessible. So explaining where there are the cultural issues, explaining what those cultural issues are going to be, the nuances around, um, you know, Ramadan. Large
Yeah.
celebrations don't take place during Ramadan in certain countries. So, all of these, where's language going to be a barrier? Where is the planning process actually operating in a different way? That's probably one of the bigger ones. So,
Right.
in the US, they're really quick to respond to emails, respond to inquiries, same day. They work late at night. It's there. It's in their culture. In the UK, you're unlikely to get a response on certain days of the week or outside of hours, but you will usually get a response within 48 hours. You look at some businesses in France, you won't get a response for a week, and that's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
It's not that they're being slack, it's how they
Different
operate.
culture, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So some countries have moved over to WhatsApp. So Quite a lot of it is just helping couples understand that. We always advocate for them to have a wedding planner in the UK that's going to understand what they're looking for, what they're trying to create. But we really, really encourage wedding planners in the UK to also be in touch with partners in the countries that they're planning in. The reason that that can be so important is access to that network, just as any business has their own local network that they can call on
Yeah.
when there's a problem. You really need that in the country that the wedding's taking place in, so that if there is a problem, there's somebody there on the ground that knows where you can get a generator at no notice, or a different set of mobile toilets, or all of the logistics that are needed. And the destination weddings tend to fall into two different types. So there's the budget weddings that are going to Greece, they're happening in a hotel in Greece, they're managed by the team there. And generally, couples having that sort of wedding are pretty relaxed about how it's going to work. It's not going to be a disaster if the cake doesn't turn up. It's not a disaster if the caterers don't turn up. It will be fine. Somebody will have a mobile phone if the photographer doesn't turn up. And that has to be the approach that you take. The big multi-day weddings that involve a lot of money, so a lot of the multicultural weddings, these tend to be really, really significant events. And they need really, really careful planning. So, guest logistics apart from just the wedding. So those are going to be the ones where it is planners that really know their stuff. So our role as Beyond Weddings is to help couples identify the country they want to get married in, possibly the venue they want to get married in, and then the planners that can help that happen. We then step back. We don't get involved in the detail at all. We literally just work as matchmakers. So our job is to go out there, travel a lot. There's benefits to the job as well. It's lots of travel to some really, really beautiful places, and really understand, so that you can really understand how the venues operate and what the ideal clientele are for that venue. So getting to know the venues, getting that video footage so that you can see exactly what it looks like, where the loading bay is, all of the useful information for planners, and then sharing that with planners and with couples.
Yeah. I mean, I remember watching Jeff Bezos, getting married on the news a few months back, and thinking, I'm glad I wasn't his wedding planner. I mean, that must have been a bit of a nightmare. Let me ask you about, I mean, your business has been very successful over quite a long period of time as well, in the scheme of things. I mean, what would you say are the factors that have made you successful? Because I mean, it's one of those markets where there's been a few people that have kind of come and gone. What is it that's made you successful, do you think?
Having the right team. So the right team, and a lot of the team here have been here for, several of them have been here more than 15 years. In fact,
Wow.
more than half have been here for more than 15 years. So I think that is really, really important. It allows you to, when you're on that roller coaster, when you're going through a dip, you need to know that people are going to stay there and they're going to hold your hand and they're screaming alongside you. Because that is business. That's how it operates. And we've managed to stay profitable all the way through. We've had times that have been less profitable, and those have been the times that you then rely on the team just tightening their belts a little bit and working out what they can do to get you to next year, where you can bring around the changes. Because however much we'd all love to have that crystal ball and be able to make the changes before it's needed, sometimes you need to just see the data coming in, and there's that little bit of a lag. And but being on the front foot, again, it comes to being on the front foot, having the team behind you, but being able to flex, make the changes, and stay current, even if everything around you is changing.
And have there been critical moments that have kind of shaped you as a CEO? Have you been changed by the experience of doing what you're doing?
I would say one of the critical moments has been embracing the Gen Z generation into the workplace. I found that very hard, and I think other CEOs would say the same. And I think particularly, I would say going into the beginning of last year, we were really feeling it quite clearly, because we were still managing the return back to work and the return back into the office by everyone. We're still not entirely office based. I think, like a lot of businesses, we do operate a little bit of hybrid working. And having this culture that it started to feel like the tail was wagging the dog,
Mm.
and it needed, because we have so many of that generation coming into the business, naturally into the marketing team. Because as a CEO, I always listen to feedback from everyone within the company. I found I was being unduly influenced by the wishes and desires of a generation that really know what they want. And that was being challenged by those that had been in the business for a long time, knew what was good for the business, and wasn't comfortable with the changes. And very difficult for me at the time to identify what is right and fair going forward.
Mm.
And actually, how we dealt with it was as a team. We had a whiteboard. I went through an exercise with everyone, just looking at how we wanted our culture to be, how we wanted to work, what we wanted our workplace to be. And you could see the massive difference between the different generations as to what they were wanting out of their workplace, and out of their
And how
work.
did you resolve those differences? Because I mean, I've come across a similar thing. I mean, and some of those different perspectives can be quite stark, can't they? I mean, how did you resolve that? How did you figure out? I mean, it sounds like Tony Blair in his third way. You know, it's not left, it's not right, it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, how did you figure out the way forward in that situation?
And you're absolutely right. It's finding that middle lane. I think it's listening to everyone. So I sat down with everyone individually. I looked at the whiteboard. I left everyone with it to write on it. Looked at it, took everything to heart, as you do as a CEO. First of all, thump in the stomach of, wow, there's a lot here to unpack. Then met with everyone individually, unpacked it, found out what was important to people, and actually realized that a little bit of firm, strong leadership was going to go a very long way there. And
Mm.
so finding ways to make sure that the generation coming in were heard, that they didn't need to show their voices through the way they worked because they would be listened to. So
Mm.
making sure that was in place was really important, making sure there was that respect within the team in all directions. And also having that ability as a CEO to go, right, we can learn a lot from this generation. What we're seeing within our team is what's happening in all of the venue teams that we're dealing with. So actually, how can we change the products that we are offering to clients to help with that? So it's been things like helping them with email automation, because we know that the workforce generation coming in now are probably going to be unwilling to log on to their email at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on a Sunday night, which is when couples, we know from our data, that's when couples are sending inquiries. We also know from our data that the venue that responds first is going to be far more likely to pick up the show round and therefore the booking. So little things like that, actually learning from this generation, going, if it's happening here, it's probably
Yeah.
happening everywhere. So they have been a gift to us now. We see them as a gift. It just at the time, it was one of those moments where I went, I'm not sure I've got the energy to do this. I can deal with business crises. It's much harder dealing with personalities.
Yeah, yeah, and dealing with personalities is always the hard bit of building a business, I think. Let me ask you about. I mean, you talked about the things that you've learned. I mean, when you look back on the journey, what would you say are the big things that you've learned along the way?
Wow. Trust your instinct as long as it is backed with the data that that can allow that. I think has always served me very well. Team, all about having the right team around you with the right attitude, and be quick to make decisions
Mm.
when there's the wrong person within your team.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that I'm still, 30 years on, I'm still taking too long to make those decisions, because it's really difficult in a small team to disconnect emotion from those decisions. But I think it is there's that lovely saying, it's better to have a hole in your business. I think it is important.
Yeah, no, totally, I get that, and they're always the difficult decisions. Those ones, aren't they? They're never easy. And let me ask you about if you were to go back to the beginning and start from scratch, is there anything that you would do differently, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I try and learn all of the stuff that I've learned in the last 5 years right at the beginning. I think, I guess every CEO learns gradually and incrementally as they go along. But it does feel like in the last 5 years, that information highway has just opened up for, I don't know, certainly for me personally, the knowledge I have gained in the last 5 years probably matches the knowledge I gained in the first 25 years. And I just think if I had that knowledge, if I had that level of knowledge from the beginning, how different would that be? But because a lot of that knowledge comes from spending time with entrepreneurs who are mixing with other entrepreneurs who have been through that cycle, it's very, very difficult to get that. So, I'm talking to a group tomorrow, Thursday evening, from my old school. So it's a group that are wanting to learn more about setting up their own businesses, and particularly within the marketing channel. So actually, I think for CEOs and entrepreneurs to spend time in those groups and be available to mentor people setting out on their journey is really valuable. But the problem is, I had some of those mentors to a degree, but when you don't know the questions to ask,
Mm. It's
you
difficult.
can't ask the questions.
Let me pick that question up. Let's pick that point up then, because I think that's a really valuable. I mean, what you're talking about is cultural transmission. You're talking about the older generation helping the younger generation move forward. I mean, that seems to me to be a pretty important part of how the entrepreneurial community functions.
Yeah, yeah.
Older, more experienced entrepreneurs help younger, less experienced entrepreneurs. Let me ask you then, what would that one piece of advice that would you give? What would a one piece of really valuable advice be for a rookie CEO? What would you say? What's the one thing they should know or do or think about?
Trust your network. Think, trust your network, have the right network, have the right people to bounce ideas off, because you are operating on your own, and you have to operate on your own. You cannot be unduly influenced by your team. You need to be able to take the information, take the insights from them. But ultimately, in order to build a business, because you're having to make some difficult decisions that may impact the team, it cannot be your team alone that are driving those decisions. So I think having that network, having those small group of others around you whose advice you trust implicitly is really important. And it's something we're trying to build within the UK Wedding Association. So those on the advisory board are all people like me who really share that value of the more information we can give to businesses coming into our industry or developing within our industry, the more professional and credible our industry will be. So how do we allow for that knowledge transfer? And some of that is through the educational networking events that we're hosting, but also some of it is just having those professionals on hand that you can tap into for advice and information if you're stuck on something. How should I approach this? I think it's really valuable,
Yeah. I mean,
and I hope that stays something that is face to face and not AI replicated in the future.
it sounds to me like you're saying, surround yourself with good people. I mean, whether it's a good team of staff or whether it's a good set of advisors or good people on the board or a good bunch of entrepreneurs that you hang out with or whatever. I mean, surround yourself with good people seems to me to be pretty good advice, because the
Yeah, and
alternative, if
listen
you
to them.
surround yourself with idiots, is really not going to help, is it? So I think it's a great piece of advice and a great way to end the interview. Alison, thank you for sharing that journey. I mean, it sounds like you've had a really interesting time. But it also sounds like you've got an interesting few years ahead. So, good luck going forward, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm certainly looking forward to the next few years.
Have fun. Cheers, Alison. Bye bye.
Bye bye.